That's what we're doing. Let me tell you a little bit about the precedent that our first guest, Bob Evans, really follows. In the firmament of Hollywood, there have always been the great moguls. There have always been the terrific producers. For example, here's a photograph of Louis B. Mayer, who was the lion in the MGM company. He said there are more stars in MGM than there are in heaven. Here is Sam Goldwyn of the Goldwyn Studios, a man who is famous for his misuse of words. A couple examples. He said, "In 2 words, I'm impossible." And when it came to discussing ideas for movies, he said, "I'm tired of the old cliches. I want new cliches." Here is Adolf Zucker, the founder of Paramount Pictures, a company that Bob Evans worked for 10 years. When this man turned to be 100 years old, they said, "What is the secret of your longevity, Mr. Zucker? Why have you lived to be 100 years old?" You know what he said? "Because I gave up cigarettes 2 years ago." That's what he said. Now, the man who joins us right now, Bob Evans, is in the tradition of these great producers, these great studio chiefs. Let me tell you a little bit about his background. He was an actor on one of my all-time favorite programs, a radio show I used to listen to when I was about this big, called Let's Pretend. Remember Let's Pretend on the radio? Remember the theme song? Dun, 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 dun. We got that down? Good. He also was on Archie Andrews on the radio. In films, he was in The Man of a Thousand Faces, The Sun Also Rises, and The Weirdo Who Walked. What was it, Bob?
The Fiend.
The Fiend. The Fiend Who Walked Around. He became head of production at Paramount under his auspices. Such films as The Odd Couple, Rosemary's Baby, Godfather 1, Godfather 2 were produced, True Grit, among many. He is now an independent producer of the highest stature. Chinatown was his work, currently here in New York, Marathon Man. And this is his favorite song.
You must remember this.
And here is Mr. Bob Evans. Join us, Bob.
Right, I don't know how you found out.
We find out stories. Sit down and listen to it for a second. Well, that's one of our great producing elements here in the show. Sit down and listen to it.
It's a wonderful song, though. That it is. It's one of the great pictures of all time, too.
It really is. Now, I want to ask you a question based on that song. There's that also happens to be one of my, let's say, 5 or 10 most favorite songs. There's a lyric in there that says, "The fundamental things apply as time goes by." What are the fundamental things?
Well, that's a good question, Bill. We don't live in fundamentals anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of love story that was is very difficult to make today, going to the fundamental things. And that's why there's such a scarcity of love stories being made. The mores, the way people live, love is different than it was then.
Mm-hmm.
And to capture that in today's standards is just very difficult. I wish we could make a picture that would fit that song.
Do you think that we could return to an era of romanticism again? In films, like you did the great film Love Story, right? Which is one of the all-time big box office. This is really a simple story.
Very.
Really? But why is it so difficult? You said to me before the show, we're looking for love stories.
I don't think there's a bigger kind of film to make than a good man-woman story. I think everybody wants to see a man-woman story. Women take men to the movies. Men don't take women to the movies. And women all want to see a good man-woman story. They don't necessarily want to see films about women, but they want to see a good man-woman story.
Relationships.
You know, relationships. And it's very difficult to do because women's parts are very difficult to write.
Now, why is that? It seems like there are many beautiful and appealing actresses, as many as ever, perhaps. I don't know why.
It's not the actresses, it's the material. It's very easy writing for a man. He has many props. He has cars, he has guns, he has horses, he has chases.
And sometimes women are used as the props, too.
But they end up being props. That's the problem. Women have been written as tapestry and with very little texture. For a writer to write a woman properly, you have to give her layers of texture. A woman's greatest prop, I think, is mystery. And mystery is difficult to write. It's much easier writing a chase than it's writing mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, most of the women's roles that have been on the screen in the last years are tapestry. They're just around. They don't do anything. They're there because it's another pretty face.
How long will it take for that to change? Because I think with the emergence of the whole women's movement, and as more women get to be people like yourself in the film business, producers, directors, writers, isn't it going to change?
Oh, I think it will change. I think there are more women executives in the industry today. There are women producers, women directors, and I must tell you, my assistant is a woman. People who work for me, when I think women basically are brighter than men. And I would rather hire a woman working for me than a man.
You've made a statement that I find personally interesting. You said, the older I get, the more difficult it is for me to understand women, or something like that.
Well, it's true.
Why is that?
You're always, women are just brighter. I think men tend to underestimate the brain of a woman, and they're far more naive than women. And the older I get, I continually make my same mistakes.
You keep repeating the same patterns? What are some of the mistakes?
I would rather not get into that.
I don't blame. No, that's perfect.
But they're there, I promise you.
You know something? I know what you mean.
And women know how to handle situations much better than men. They're far less emotional, I think, than men. They handle pain better than men. Do you know that women control 80% of the wealth in America?
I've heard that.
Because men die and leave it to the women.
They leave it all to the women.
A lot of rich widows.
Let's take a break and we'll continue. I want you to get to know this man, Bob Evans, because he's done some good work. We'll talk about Marathon Man coming back right after this.
As time moves by.
We're back. Bob Evans and I are just discussing what the components of a good love story are. We should actually share that with people, because you're a film producer who is in search of the great love story, and you were just explaining to me that a soap opera is one thing, but the classic, great, monumental love story that would get people to come into the theater and be cheering at the end, what does it require?
I think it needs sadness. And
people cheer for sadness?
From Camille on up and down. You must have something that unhappy, something that's sad. It has to have an underlying pin that you're waiting for something to happen that the audience knows is going to happen and the people who are playing the parts do not know. It can't be just daily problems in a relationship. From the beginning, there has to be a theme that something big is going to happen.
Hence, in your great film, Love Story, we knew at the beginning that the young woman was going to die. Is that correct?
No, we had it that way, but you didn't know she was going to die. We started it out originally where the shows Ryan O'Neal walking out after meeting the doctor and then doing a flashback, but we didn't tell the story that way. And it built up because we realized that if you found out in the very first scene, you lose the impact of the scene when he finds out she's going to die because you don't know who the person is. And the only way you can care about something is to know about the person. As an example, you can see 10,000 soldiers killed on a field and you have no feeling for it. One person, yeah. If you can feel more for two people in a room than you can for 10,000 soldiers in a field. Yeah. And so we changed the beginning of Love Story and just told it in a different order. So when the time came that Ryan found out that Allie was going to die, you really felt for Ryan getting the information. Yeah. Well, if you did it in the beginning, it wouldn't mean anything.
What are the components in your life's education? I mean, obviously you've had formal training, but life has also been the teacher for you. What would you say that the skills that you have that make Bob Evans a great producer, what are they? I know you're noted to have a great memory. That's one.
I'm obsessive for detail, for nuance. Not to my credit necessarily, because I do a lot of other things badly because of it. And unlike other producers, I can't make many films. There are producers who can make 3, 4, 5
They can
films
really
a
roll
year.
them out, yeah.
I cannot do that. I could take 2 years on a film. As an example, in Marathon Man, we were supposed to open the picture last summer. And it was their big picture, and I went to them in April and said, I can't have it ready in time. And they said, you have to. We have $12 million in guarantees. And I said, you're going to have to give the $12 million back, because I won't have the picture for summer. And I spent with John Schlesinger another 6 months on working on the film.
On detail.
On all detail.
So you fit in the category of a man who is obsessive about detail. Now, about your memory, which is stories about your memory are legion, I have heard, that you really can have total recall about certain things.
I know every frame of footage that is shot in a film, including the outtakes and the takes. And if I had to say what I am best at in the anatomy of a film, it would be the post-production work and the editing stages and the scoring stages. And it's recall. It helps me a lot in memory. I know it's sort of exciting because you see something once and remember it, and you can use it in so many times, and it's frightening because I remember things from 15 years ago, 20 years ago, little pieces of film. And I can go back into a cutting room and work on it. When I was a kid, I did this with Daryl Zanuck. He taught me that.
Yeah. So it's like you actually have a movie screen in your head. You can close your eyes and you can see the picture right in your brain.
Yes. Every word. There was one word in Marathon Man that was an outtake that I wanted in, and everyone said it wasn't in the picture. And I had a big argument. We looked through all the takes, and the word that I wanted was in one of the takes.
See, that's what makes you the producer and everybody else working for you.
Well, no, making a film, though, is not really that way. It's very collaborative.
Yeah, it is.
And everyone works together, and everyone deserves really equal credit in making a film, beginning with the director, who deserves the credit mostly, because it's his film, it's his work. The editors are terribly important in a film. I mean, they're the unsung heroes in the making
I think
of a
that's
picture.
true. I think even as people are watching right now, they don't really know what the editors do. You know, maybe this would be interesting. We have a clip from Marathon Man. Why don't we show the clip, explain a little bit of the setup, and then when it's finished, maybe you could explain some of the components of the detail and the editing that went into just this tiny piece of film.
Good.
Okay? Now, what kind of setup do we need to explain this scene with Dustin Hoffman?
Well, without giving away the story, it's a scene where he is asked to be a shill, asked to be bait. Actually, the word is used. Bill Devane says to him, "I want you to be bait. Some guys may come after you tonight." And he says, "Why?" He says, "Just don't ask. I'll be around to protect you." And he isn't. But I want you to be bait, and he says, "Okay, I'll do it." Now we can look at the film.
Okay, roll the film and we'll look at this. This is from Marathon Man. And of course we thank Paramount Pictures.
As you see, it's not a musical, Bill.
Just your basic light romantic comedy, I think. Why don't we let's take a break because we need to get to a commercial. When we come back, we'll discuss some of the components, okay?
Fine.
Right after this.
Light and love song.
Bob Evans is with us. He is now an independent producer, the highest stature in Hollywood. Marathon Man, which is currently making people wind around the blocks to stand in line to see it, is his latest production. We saw a clip from it. How long did it take to do that scene with Dustin and the encroaching danger in the bathroom?
It took 3 days to do. The latter part of it, where he was dunked into the bathtub, was done about 8 times from different angles, and Dustin ended up in the hospital.
Why?
He just had no breath left, and he wanted to do it that way. He wanted to be pressed to the furthest extent of how long he could stay under the water. And it just so happens he's in remarkable physical shape because he did a lot of running and jumping. He jumped rope for 40 minutes a day. If he didn't, he could have been seriously hurt in the film, seriously out of control. But he went under the water so many times that we had to give him oxygen in the hospital, and he was out for 2 days afterwards.
Bob, you know, in knowing about you as a public figure, as a producer and so forth, and much that I've read about you would indicate that you have a life that fantasies are made of, that you live in great opulence and that you live in magnificent style. And and you certainly have the job that many people would want to have, to be the movie mogul in the tradition of the greats that we introduced you. With all of the trappings of this, on a day-to-day basis, do you find yourself just about as happy or just about as unhappy as you used to be when you were an actor or when you were in the clothing business or whatever?
Well, not as unhappy as when I was an actor, because I was an actor in two stages of my life. One as a kid from about 11 to 18 in radio and television, and then I was a film actor from the ages of 25 to 30. That was the most unhappy time of my life.
Why was that an unhappy 5 years for you?
It was frustrating. I think rejection is the worst thing a man can take. And no matter who the actor is, as big a star as he may be, or as lowly an actor as he may be, you're constantly facing rejection. And I was up for various parts at the time, which I didn't get and expected to get. I thought once I was going to have to lead Lawrence of Arabia, not to lead the part that Omar Sharif had. I flew all the way to London to test for it, and naturally didn't get it.
So that was like the pits for you.
It's tough.
But now, you're in the position now of being one who, by the very definition of your job, must use your judgment to reject others.
That's not pleasant either. You know, one of the reasons I gave up my position as head of the company was because I got tired of rejecting people. It's not a comfortable thing. You go home with a dozen scripts over a weekend and have to read them. You really have to do your homework. And you come in on a Monday morning and you set dates for the people whom you're reading their material have worked anywhere from 3 months to 3 years on. And you turn down. Now you can do it for a while, but after a while it becomes very depressing.
Yeah, I would think that
and it would. Talented people that you're turning down, and it's difficult. I don't have to do that anymore because I only want to make one picture a year. Or one every 18 months.
Well, I would think with the details that you attend to in a picture, you have to work on that level.
Oh, you do. I mean, I'm obsessive with that, and to the detriment of the rest of my life. Getting back to when you mentioned living in great opulence or what have you, I don't live in great opulence. I live at the studio most of the time, and I don't have very much of a personal life because my work is on the film.
Yeah, but what personal life you have must be pretty good.
Well, let's say it's highly profiled. It may not be. It may not be any more, or most probably not as much as many other people who. I don't lead a wild life.
What's your idea of a perfect weekend?
A perfect weekend.
A perfect weekend for Bob Evans. Something that nobody, not satisfying anybody else's demands, but for you personally, what would a perfect weekend be?
Being away with the lady I want to be with without hearing the phone ring.
No rings.
No phone at all. And the phone does not ring in my house at all. I will not allow it to ring because I hear it so often during the week.
Yeah.
The only privacy I can get is without hearing the bells. I think I'm beginning to hear bells by the end of the week in my head.
I can relate to that for sure.
That would be my idea. Very simple. Quiet and love the sun and be with someone I want to be with and no one else.
You've also been quoted as saying you would rather spend the morning in bed with your son, Joshua, your 5 or 6 year old son, than anybody else in the world.
Well, that's true. He's my one child. I don't see him that much, unfortunately.
I mean, you have enormous power, and you certainly have wealth. How will you help him to understand the value of a dollar and the value of hard work to get that dollar?
It's an interesting question, Bill, because my youth was so much different than his.
Yes.
I began working when I was 11. And it's for some reason the mentality of a boy growing up in New York is different than a boy growing up in California. It's just different. Kids learn just to be on the beach there all the time.
There's that street smarts here.
Street smarts.
Surfing.
It's a decent education, and I don't necessarily feel that college is necessary. If he wants to go, he goes. If he doesn't, he doesn't have to. But as long as he has good values, it's the most important thing.
Well, it sounds like you have a healthy attitude, not seeing him as an extension of yourself.
Oh, no.
I think don't you think that a lot of times parents are living part of their life through the child and exactly see the child as an extension of their own selves rather than an autonomous being.
I would not want my son to be an extension of myself. I'd hope he'd have a much better life than I've had. Maybe not on the surface better, but inside better. And I wouldn't want him to have my life at all.
One last thing. When I was a child, I listened to this program I mentioned, Let's Pretend.
Yes.
You were an actor on
yes,
that.
I was.
Very young.
Lila Max, Let's Pretend.
Yeah,
She was the producer of it and the director.
What did you want for yourself in those days when you were there? You were a young boy like 10 years old or whatever,
Right.
acting on a radio program with a big audience of people out there
Right.
watching the radio program occur behind the mics. What were you thinking about? Was this it? Did you know I want to be in showbiz or
Well,
what?
I did want to be in show business. I wanted to be an actor, quite frankly. And
You were?
I was, and it was rather successful, but I was never that good. I was lucky. I wasn't that good. And there's an old proverb that goes, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. And I don't think I was prepared very well for being an actor. I was just lucky. I worked a lot. And I realized that at best, my talent as an actor was limited. And I didn't want to stay at it unless I could. I knew I wasn't going to be a big star.
You know, that's interesting. And it just hit me right now that one of the keys to your success might have been recognizing your own limitations and acting, I don't mean acting in terms of acting on the stage, but reacting to your own limitations and projecting yourself toward your own strengths.
Oh, Bill, that's so true, because the most difficult thing for a person to do, anybody, is to be able to look at themselves in the mirror and say, I'm not good at this. I really don't cut it here. Yeah. It's easy to criticize others. It's very difficult to look in the mirror and criticize yourself.
Yeah.
And when you can do that, it can be terribly constructive to the rest of your life. And I did that at a point in my life and gave up a contract with Darryl Zanuck that I was going to do 2 pictures that year. One was The Longest Day, and the other was A Chapman Report. I was signed to do the 2 films, and I walked away from them, because I knew I'd do them and another year would pass in my life and I'd be at the same place as I was at the moment. And that's tough to do.
There's a good lesson there for all of us.
And
Bob, I want to thank you for being here.
It's been a pleasure. Back again. Nice
Thank you.
Bill.
It'd be nice to have you back again. We will be back to talk about something this man does. He gambles in one way. In Atlantic City, they want to make it happen on the roulette wheel.